Welcome back. Well, let's bring in former Australian Ambassador to Israel, Dave Sharma, and former Israeli Ambassador to Australia, Mark Soffer. Welcome to you both. Thank you so much for your time. Mark, I want to start with you, and I want to ask you about the question of how to retrieve these hostages. Will the priority be crushing Hamas or retrieving the citizens, and how does this work?
Well, first and foremost, I think number one on the list is retrieving the hostages. This for Israel always has been the saving of lives is prime, not only for Israel but for the Jewish world and for any civilized person throughout history. So yes, this is the major problem I think facing us right now, and we're going to have to deal with it in a very delicate way. There is already now a projector, which we call somebody who's actually involved in the project and running it, a very senior military officer, and things will be held behind the scenes that we won't know anything at all about it, and nobody will know until the end, my reckoning.
Dave Sharma, how do you think this should happen now? I mean, would this have to be a ground offensive? Because airstrikes, I mean, you just don't know who you'd kill.
Look, I think this is going to be an incredibly difficult operation, and Israel obviously will need to balance the rightful desire of to get back its citizens and the families of those who have been abducted and kidnapped with its military objectives, which seem clearly to me to be the complete destruction of Hamas, the capture or killing of its military leadership, and the annihilation of Hamas military infrastructure. I don't see how this conflict can end any other way. But reconciling that objective with protecting or potentially rescuing these hostages is very difficult. I mean, Hamas will use these hostages not only for political propaganda purposes, not only for military leverage, but as human shields as well.
I know we've only seen some videos that they've released, but we haven't even started to see the full-blown propaganda yet. Mark, Israel's Defence Force and Mossad is meant to be the best in the world. The Defence Force meant to be the fourth strongest in the world. So why were they missing in action? Why didn't they protect Israeli citizens when the siege began on Saturday?
Well, it's far too early to say, of course, at this stage. I think clearly and palpably there was a major lapse in intelligence and information. This is apparent. But right now, all focus and every focus must be made on the military aspects of the war that we're in. And I use the word war with a great deal of trepidation, but nonetheless that is what it is. And only after it's over and the strategic aims have been achieved, the strategic aims that Dave just spoke about, will the entire investigation of what happened, how it happened, not just the intelligence, obvious failure, but possibly other military aspects of the war in the first couple of days will be handled.
I mean, the Times of Israel reports that there was, in some communities, no resistance or no presence from the IDF when we now know 160 civilians were being dragged across the border. Dave, does this shock you? I mean, you spent a lot of time in Israel. Does this shock you?
It does shock me, and I know it's shocked a lot of the people of Israel as well. I mean, you're quite right, and look, I don't want to engage in a fact-finding commission now, and now is not the time to do so as well. These issues will clearly need to be looked at in the wake of this conflict, and lessons learned and people held accountable. But the fact that, look, Hamas seemingly penetrated Israel's border undetected or largely undetected. They overran a military base, one of the bases of the Gaza division, which is entrusted with the security of that border and entrusted with the security of that part of Israel. And look, there's still active Hamas terrorists in about 9 locations inside Israel now, including in Sderot, a major town close to Israel. I mean, for this to have been allowed to happen is it's a terrible operational failure, and there will have to be lessons learned from this.
Mark, there are news reports that Iran planned this attack. Do you think this is partly in response to the deal that was being brokered between Saudi Arabia and Israel to normalise relations? And I had Sharon Haskell, Israeli politician, on my show earlier tonight. She said that all options are on the table when it comes to Israel retaliating against Iran. What's your analysis? Do you think this could now eventuate?
No, I don't think it has any or particular emphasis on the Saudi deal with the United States. I think Iran is Iran is a country dedicated, just like the Hamas and the Hezbollah, to death, destruction, hatred, and murder. And they, of course, are behind it. They have been behind every act of instability and murder, terrorism in this part of the Middle East for many years now. So yes, the Iranian regime is a rogue regime. And as far as we're concerned, they are behind it, and not just us. Our intelligence is knowledgeable about that. And so the question is really not how we deal with Iran at this stage or what will happen. It's true, as Sharon said, that all options are on the table. But right now, our focus and thoughts and minds are on what's happening down in the south and the importance that it doesn't spread, because Iran is also behind the Hezbollah in the north. And as you know, it's situated in Syria, which is undergoing a civil war of over 1 million people killed in just over a decade, with the Al-Qaeda, ISIS, pro-Iranian and pro-Syrian government forces there, including troops on the ground. So Iran has got its nefarious finger everywhere. And the deal with Saudis and the United States is really just an additional aspect to it, but not the trigger.
But isn't there a concern, Dave Sharma, bring you in here, isn't there a concern that Iran and other of Israel's enemies could use this current vulnerability to target Israel?
I think there's absolutely a concern that, as Mark said, there's Hezbollah, Iranian armed and supported and financed proxy on Israel's northern border in southern Lebanon. You've got pro-Iranian cells within the West Bank as well that do not fall under the remit or the authority of the Palestinian Authority. They can all be energised, they can all be activated, and even if they're not centrally directed, you'll often find in situations like this where tensions are running high, you will get rogue actors or rogue elements that seek to capitalise on a situation or mimic or replicate terror attacks elsewhere. And that is a real danger here, I think, now for Israel, that this inflames situations elsewhere and forces it to divert attention to multiple fronts.
Yeah, all right. Thank you both so much for your time this evening, Dave Sharma and Mark Sofa. Please stay safe in Israel.